We're looking at Mercury in Leo. Now, as you can see, we also, just as an aside, we have Mercury and the Sun that are within 7 degrees of each other, and we call that in astrology a conjunction. And because Mercury has to stay within 28 degrees of the Sun in any chart, that's why we will often see Sun-Mercury conjunctions. I call that the information junkie. Okay, this is someone who likes information, likes learning about things, wants to talk, wants to gossip, someone who's very curious. We often see that for Sun-Mercury conjunctions. In any case, let's focus back on the Mercury. Mercury is in Leo. So this is someone who wants to express themselves in a bold way. Mercury is about communication. Mercury is about self-expression. Mercury is about memory. Okay, so when you have Mercury in Leo, you're looking at someone who is probably very open about who they are. Someone who is wants to talk about themselves in a very proud way. Someone who wants to communicate in a dynamic way with passion. Someone who wants to be noticed for communicating. Okay, this isn't someone who's going to want to sit back and say nothing. This is not a wallflower sort of placement. This is a wonderful placement for people who want to get their thoughts and feelings out into the world by talking about them, or generally speaking, communicating about them. Now, Mercury, as we know, is the planet of communication. Now, communication isn't just verbal, folks. It's any transmission or receipt of a message. So that includes telephone, for those of you who still use the phone, email, text messaging, social media, anywhere that anything that transmits or receives a signal is under Mercury's rule. And so the Leo energy is going to permeate all of the ways that she expresses herself. Also, because Mercury rules the memory, Mercury in Leo means that likely Alysa is going to remember those times positively where she was the center of attention and where she was recognized. Okay, again, Leo is a sign that usually does very well when they are recognized and applauded and nurtured in a public way. Now, for those of you who are looking at the chart closely, we have this little tiny symbol at the very end, right here. And this is the symbol for retrograde. So we know that Alysa Liu has a Mercury retrograde in her chart. Cozy Curls, you're asking me about arrogance more probable with the Sun-Mercury conjunction. I would say that if we're talking about Leo, maybe. In other signs, probably not. But I have not seen Sun-Mercury conjunction in Leo to necessarily lead to arrogance. If it was in the first house, or if it was very prominent, and because we don't know what house it is here, we really can't say, but I would be looking at the house placement for that, as well as the sign. So honestly, with Sun-Mercury in Leo, I mean, it's possible, but in this particular chart, I haven't seen anything that would lead me in that direction. Okay? Hope that answers your question, but thank you. So we have Mercury retrograde here. Now we're in a Mercury retrograde right now. About 20% of people have Mercury retrograde in their natal charts, folks. It's not rare. It's pretty common. As you know, or I can repeat it for you, Mercury is retrograde 3 times a year for about 3 weeks at a time. Some years, it's 4 times a year. And I know a lot of you people out there are going, oh, no, 3 is enough. Mercury retrograde in a natal chart really means that a person's communication style is turned more inward rather than outward. Okay? So while I would normally say that a person with Mercury in Leo might be more outspoken, Alysa Liu is probably less so because she has that Mercury turned inward. Retrograde means it was going backward in the zodiac during the time that she was born. When you are dealing with someone with a natal Mercury retrograde, you need to make sure that you're allowing them the opportunity to communicate, that you are encouraging them to communicate. They need to be talking about what's going on in their head Remember that Mercury is the planet that rules the brain, folks. So about 90% of the things that someone could say when you're talking about a Mercury retrograde natal person with a natal Mercury retrograde, 90% of that stuff stays up here, and the rest of us don't even hear about it. In the mind of the person with a Mercury retrograde, you could almost see a Chiron at the bottom of the screen with what their thoughts are. So we need to encourage Mercury retrograde people to express themselves fully, especially when we're in romantic or intimate relationships with them, when we're close friends with them. The closer we are to someone, the more important we need to encourage them to communicate. So the natal Mercury retrograde is a very interesting wrinkle here. Now, for those of you dealing with transiting Mercury retrograde right now, it's important for us all to remain calm during Mercury retrograde. Right now, Mercury is retrograding through Pisces. And so for us, we need to make sure that we're doing a good job communicating our thoughts, our emotions, our needs during this time in a very basic and clear way. This is not a time to have a very important conversation about, for example, the future of a relationship, or I probably wouldn't ask for a raise right now. Certain conversations are probably better had when Mercury is direct. However, when it comes to things like job interviews, I've had clients ask me, should I not take a job interview because Mercury's in retrograde? Absolutely not. It's a job interview. You go and you try to be very cognizant of what you're saying, how you're saying it, and what you're being asked, even more than you normally would in an interview situation. So with Mercury retrograde in the natal chart, Alysa is probably a lot less communicative than perhaps we would normally see with someone with Mercury in Leo.